Welcome aboard. Special guest this week is Nick Santo from NixTrainz. We chat all things about his awesome little decoder buddies and all his other offerings on his website. He's also offering a 10% discount to watchers of Motorola Techniques, so you need to watch towards the end to get the code word to access that awesome little deal. So thank you very much for that, Nick. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Daz from Motorola Technique. Our YouTube channel produces predominantly how-to videos and also interviews of modelers throughout the world. So if you think you could fit the bill or know someone who might fit the bill, email link is below. Please reach out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, hit that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming content. Also, I've got a Patreon page to keep the content rolling, so a big shout out to all my patrons this far. So without further ado, let's get started. And a little public service announcement here. Make sure you vote one for Gordy Robinson in the upcoming NMRA elections. I believe personally he has brought this hobby into the 21st century with such initiatives as the NMRA X virtual clinics and the like, so make sure you vote for Gordy. Welcome aboard, Nick Santo from NixTrainz. So thank you very much for taking time away from your family and your lovely little business to chat with me at Motorola Techniques.
Well, thank you, Daz. I really appreciate being on with you.
So obviously how this came about, you reached out via an email off another, I'm assuming off another video, probably through the AML, Modeler's Life podcast, I'm assuming. So thank you very much for doing that. I'm sort of looking forward to video or editing, and also interviewing anyone that's willing to have a chat about our lovely hobby.
The hobby is just wonderful. I've enjoyed it all the way along.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. So who would be thinking that probably a year ago when I went down this little rabbit hole of starting YouTube, that I'd be talking to someone in Burlington up in Vermont in the United States about Decoder Buddies, I should say. So who would have thought?
It's amazing. I think COVID has kind of helped it along, but it's still amazing that the technology was that close and easy to manifest itself. It's been a lot of fun. Definitely.
So, Nick, you can be found on your website, and I put all these links in the description below. So, nixtrainz.com. So that's NixTrainz.com. And also the same spelling, he can be found on Facebook. And if you want to email him, I've noticed he's got a sort of an online form on his website for any questions about the Decoder Buddies that we'll talk about today. So is there anywhere else that you wanted to put up there, Nick, that someone might be able to get in contact with you? Well, those two forums, pretty good.
Sure, excuse me. Through Facebook is very good. I am very responsive and pride myself in it.
Sure, that's great. That's great. So, Nick, normally I like to chat with people at sort of the beginning of every interview about sort of their history in the hobby and how they've got to be where they are today. So, can you sort of tell us a little bit about your introduction into the hobby and to where we are sitting today?
I can. I started out at between 4 and 5 years old. My grandfather was the catalyst for model trains. He gave me a figure 8 on a piece of plywood and put it in his living room, and I've got a picture of myself. I should have sent it to you. Playing with that train, and
yeah, it's nice.
It kind of grew from there. I had a different layout every year for a number of years. It turned into a figure 8, or turned from a figure 8 into a figure 8 with an oval around it. And then it just kept growing and growing and growing until one time he was an artist in the 40s, and he was known around the world too.
Right.
He was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. Just
okay.
Yeah.
He was an artist in the 40s and pretty well known, and he had a studio behind his house where he painted, and in the studio and in kind of the sitting room or guest area, he put a railroad that I went into on Christmas morning, and I took a look at it, and I just my chin hit the floor. It was amazing. I looked at it and I said, "Boy, how am I ever going to learn how to run this monstrosity?" And it was a beautiful monstrosity, but nonetheless, um, it was intimidating, and it was Lionel 3-track and Marks mixed in, O scale or O27, and it had two two-sided throttle or two single throttles, two Marks throttles on it.
Sure.
So I could run 2 trains at once, and it got me into model railroading. He was definitely the catalyst for the modeling part.
Yeah, lovely.
He was a type of person, and I think I inherited a little bit of his manners. If he needed something, he made it. He made my aunt's dresser for her bedroom, and he made just a number of things. When he wanted something, if he couldn't buy it or if it wasn't available, he made it.
Yeah, sure.
And that gave me an impetus to be able to, say, give it a try.
Yeah, sure.
The other part of that whole thing was it taught me that from the complexity of the railroad or the model railroad, it was very complex, and it taught me that if I worked at it, I could achieve making it run, and after a while, I could make it run very well. It wasn't particularly a switch and layout; it was roundy round more than anything.
Sure.
But to get 2 trains going and not have them collide and do everything, it was a handful at first.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky. I learned a lot from that.
Yeah.
And then my father was a photographer, and he did a lot of landscape photography. He did a lot for my grandfather too. He'd take a picture, and my grandfather would replicate it. But we also chased trains. He has some wonderful pictures of trains that we went to see, and my aunt was wonderful about trains too. We'd always stop and count the cars and look at the trains. And there were a lot of trains back then. I'm from Bennington, Vermont, which is 250 miles north of New York City. So it was very busy part of the United States for trains.
Yeah, sure. That's a lovely little story. It's very not too dissimilar to mine, really. My grandpa got me into model trains as well. They lived across the road from sort of the major, what you'd call in your part of the world, a Class 1 line between my state or my capital city of Adelaide to Melbourne on the eastern seaboard, and we used to go across the road, watch all the freight trains run up the grade into the hills, so to speak. And he also had a rather large HO layout, all American at that time, because that's all you could sort of purchase ready to run. And I remember so fondly he's built this stool I'd get up in the middle of the layout, and I'd just watch trains run around for hours. And now it's rather infectious, and took me, I went away from the hobby for a few years and sort of got back into it when I was sort of 12 years of age, and then I'm 46 now, and I'm sure my wife wished I wasn't in the hobby, but the amount of time I'm spending on it, but keeps her out of her hair as well, so that's all good. So tell us, Nick, just about, in a few minutes or so, sort of your current layout. What you're doing, sort of the scale, what you're modeling.
What I have is an HO layout. It takes up a 20 by 30 basement. When we moved into the house, I had an idea that I wanted a big layout. So I made a deal with my wife. I told her I'd give her half the basement. And it happened to be the bottom half, but that was fine with her because she reads. So I built bookshelves throughout a lot of the basement, and then storage area through a lot of the basement. And then roughly half of the basement is workshop.
Sure.
And the layout sits on top of that. And on one side, it climbs a grade off across my left shoulder, climbs a grade up into a second lobe with a turnaround that comes right back down the hill and back into the main part of the layout.
Sure. So let's sort of venture into NixTrainz and Decoder Buddies. That's how I first heard about you, and that's obviously how you've reached out to me as well. So you sort of touched on a little backstory regarding your introduction into trains with your grandfather, and you made a comment that a lot of his etiquette rubbed off on yourself, so to speak, in regards to if you didn't have it or couldn't buy it, you would make it. So can you sort of tell us a little bit about this little cottage industry and how it sort of came about?
Sure. It really started in that same vein. It's taken a long time. Back when we moved into this house, I had Athearn blue box locomotives, and I put NCE decoders in them, and that was fine. There was a fellow in Vergennes, Vermont, about 40 miles south of here, who was doing very fine custom models, painting red locomotives. Let me show you a red locomotive, if I'm lucky. How's this showing up for you? This is a Vermont Railway.
Yeah, that's lovely.
One that I'm working on now.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, that's one you've done a lot of lighting work to on YouTube, isn't it? So
it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
It's an Athearn. It's essentially a blue box, and I've got a bunch of blue boxes that I'm going to have to convert now too. What happened was Atlas came out with the QSI style locomotives, and Carl stopped painting because Atlas was very good to us and did Green Mountain Railroad and Vermont Railway locomotives. So the GP38s and the GP40s were just very easily procured from then on. The problem was initially that they had QSI decoders in them. QSI decoders were nice. They did a lot of things that people wanted. The problem was I wanted a little bit more than what they gave me. I tried to get them to have ditch lights in them.
Sure.
And I worked with QSI Solutions, Josh Shedeker, and Tony's Trains is on the internet. It might be a name that you've bumped into. Mm-hmm. He's about 5 miles away from me. And Tony's been in the cellar. He's an awful nice guy.
Sure.
So we all tried to work out getting ditch lights into Atlas GP40s at that point, and it just wasn't going to work. So I was a flight instructor and looked down on trains in the Champlain Valley a lot, and I convinced myself that was as good as model railroading. No, it didn't. It wasn't really.
Probably more expensive way of looking at it, yes.
Well, yeah.
With flight time.
Yeah, I was lucky. I wasn't paying for it. I was getting paid to be in that right seat, but that's okay. So anyway, it kind of got put on the back burner for a while, and when I came back, the economy slowed. We shut the business down, and I was sitting in the cellar, working on getting ditch lights going again. And at that point, Locksound came out with the decoders that would do 8 functions in a plug and play, and that was good, except it was a little bit too long. And I cut the tabs off the front end where you hitch the lights and the tracks to, and put it in, made it fit into the Atlas. And of course, it didn't work. The decoder itself had failed, but I took a deep breath and said, I hope that Lock Sound is going to take this back and buy into the situation that I know how to solder and I didn't do anything wrong with it, and they did. They're good people,
Sure.
as is Soundtracks and the rest of the manufacturers. They're on our side, I think, realizing that it isn't necessarily easy to install a decoder.
No.
So they were good, and I got another board to put into the locomotive, and off we went. At that point, I decided that I still wanted ditch lights. I wanted to be able to install them easier, and they came out with the 21-pin decoder, and that was the beginning of being able to do a couple iterations of prototypes and fitting it in and making it do what I really wanted it to do. The 21-pin decoders from all the manufacturers are great in terms of size. The NMRA did a really good job of that specification, and that was the beginning of it. Then I could pull 8 lighting functions off of one decoder, and shortly thereafter I could pull 12 lighting functions off a decoder. So I changed the design of the Decoder Buddy just a little bit, and now I have both 8 and 12 output models.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. So we sort of touched on it a little bit. What has been the biggest challenge to make this board? Is it sort of, because I notice on your website that, well, let's talk about ESU and Soundtrack seem to be the 2 biggest sound decoders right now.
Yep.
They slightly, the way they use the 21 pins is slightly different. So was that a challenge to make this board, or was that sort of circumvent to make that easier? Hence one of the pros for the Decoder Buddy.
Actually, I think it's a pro. Both Soundtracks and Lock Sound or Loc Sound fit directly in, along with the rest of the manufacturers, TCS and Digitrax and NCE. Sure. It's a standard configuration, so it's just a drop in for any of those decoders.
Yeah. Okay. So we've sort of touched on a few A Pro definitely. Why Decoder Buddy? Obviously there's some newer locomotives. I'm from a sort of European steam, so I have very, very limited space in a tender, because that's where most of my decoders will sit. So we won't so much talk about that. We'll talk about American prototypes that you've got on screen here. So why is the Decoder Buddy a good fit for someone that wants to do all these lighting functions?
Actually, Des, you could use a Decoder Buddy Mini. What I did was I heard people not unlike you say, "Gee whiz, I wish we had a smaller Decoder Buddy." And so I made one the same size as a 21-pin decoder. Fits into a lot of tenders very nicely.
Oh, nice.
Doesn't have as many lighting functions available. Yeah. Easily you can pull them off. You can pull them off the board if you want with Loc Sound. I'm not sure about Soundtracks, whether they have pads on the actual decoders for the extra lighting functions. But in terms of the 2 big Decoder Buddies, they fit nicely into larger locomotives. I found that the Atlas with the QSIs and the Proto 2000s with QSIs, any space limited locomotive, it works very nicely. You have your decoder outputs. You have pads on them for 2 and 3 wire stay alives. There are two sets of pads, or pair of sets of pads for speakers and track wiring on either end of the other end of the locomotive. In terms of the wiring, the real game changer was this right here. Can you see the small connector board?
I can, yeah. Yep, for the
That
lighting functions. Yep.
yeah, that plugs into the top of the top of the locomotive. So now I've got a ways to go on this, but all the lights are connected so far. And as I finish off the lighting, I'll put those in, and the frame is nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
It isn't tough. And you know, I was into a Genesis SD78 Ace a couple days ago, doing maintenance, and the sanding lines that came down through were very challenging to get in correctly and properly. And it was just very nice not to have to be fighting with all the wires going down into the locomotive at the same time. The frame and the motor and everything was way off on the side, and I was able to work with a shell to get all those parts in very nicely.
When I watched a few videos on people installing them when I was sort of researching for having a chat with you, and one of them was, I think, the DCC guy did a nice little video on your various undertakings, I suppose, and I sort of looked at him and going, because the first thing is like, why Decoder Buddy? And then obviously, as you rightfully point out, is whenever you do an installation that's got even just two lights, front and back, and you've got to plug them directly into the chassis or where the decoder sits, you're always fighting where the body is, and you inadvertently always have to have a longer run of wires, which means you need to try to then neaten those wires up when you put the body back on, not crimp the wires. So I think that's a massive pro just in itself, how you do that. And I've got a picture of the Decoder Buddy up on screen there now, and just little things like, as you rightfully pointed out, you have the speaker and the track tabs at each end of the board. So, you know, that can save on, you know, several inches of wire going from one end of the decoder, from the locomotive or the tender if you're putting it in a steam locomotive. So I think that's a massive pro in itself.
Yep, thank you. The other thing I was thinking of was that if you have a $85, $90, $100, $103, $105 decoder, and you're going after it for the first or second time with a soldering iron, a $15 Decoder Buddy is a lot easier to whoops on.
That's right.
And the pads are made adequate so that people who aren't used to wiring can get the soldering done pretty easily. One of the you mentioned Larry, the DCC guy, and there's another Larry Linger on YouTube, who's been very pro Decoder Buddy. I bumped into him, and he does installations. He does instructional installations on YouTube, and they're absolutely excellent. His soldering technique is superb. He solves problems. He might walk away from it and say, "I'm going to come back later," and you could hear him scratching his head back when the camera's off. But he's a great problem solver, and he's just been great. He's on YouTube. He's under Solo Contracting, and his name is Larry. Yeah, Larry Linger. He's very good.
All right, I'll put all these links up.
Thank you. It might take him 5 hours to do a very complex installation, but he'll take you through every minute of it and make sure you know how to do it.
Sure. Also, another little feature, and there's a photo rolling through here, is you've also got like a little, there it is, it's on the screen right now, it's like the little testing board, so you can actually test prior, or your 8 functions or 12 functions prior to putting the lid back on, so to speak.
Indeed. And on your program track, that essentially makes your locomotive a decoder tester. You can see it. It's on your program track. You can see it move back and forth. You can hear it, the horn work, or listen to the sound, and then you can also straighten out that lighting. The lighting I find on the when you have 12 lighting outputs and you want each one to be a little bit different, and a little bit different for dark and light or blink or no blink. It just it's a nice way to do business. It was a nice accidental engineering.
That's funny you say that. Was like, what have you learned from your earlier versions? But I think you've sort of covered off on that. Just sometimes that's the lovely part about this hobby. It's the mistakes we made that make sometimes, or rabbit holes we go down, sort of helps in other areas of the hobby, so to speak. But so the Decoder Buddy, I should say, is it sort of directed at the more experienced modeler, or can we sort of have more of a sort of moderate modeler that sort of has some sort of soldering skills and has a little bit of skill away from just opening the lid up and plugging a decoder in? So where's it sort of marketed at, the Decoder Buddy?
Actually, I like to market right to the beginner. I think if they take a second and watch, I can't say Larry, the DCC guy's last name for the life of me right now.
Is it Plunkett or something similar?
Yeah.
Larry DCC.
Larry Puckett.
Well. The Puckett, that's the one.
Yeah. He's been very kind to me, and he's shown how to do it. And Larry Linger, Solo Contracting, that has very, very good soldering technique. And if you watch him, if you want to play, what to do is just to grab an old transistor radio or something that's just about ready to go to the dump, and get your soldering iron out and take components off the printed circuit boards, desolder them and resolder them up a couple times, and that's about really all you need between the two of those things. Now let's take that on the other side of the coin. I've got an installer that buys from me, and decoders became very scarce for a while, and I think he said he had 50 or 55 decoder buddies in frames all ready for the decoders as soon as the decoders arrived on his doorstep.
Yeah.
So it has a nice range. The people, the experienced installers say very good things about them.
Yeah,
too.
Lovely. I could see myself using these purely on a bench test as well. What I mean by that is I predominantly have ESU decoders. So I have the lock programmer with it's almost like an interface that plugs USB into your computer that runs it that way. So I could see you could use a Decoder Buddy, just have some wire wired up and not actually using a locomotive at all, to sort of just test a few concepts of how you might do it on the bench before cracking the top on a locomotive that way as well. And I'm assuming Soundtracks have got a very similar interface to play around with CVs and the like. So I can see that to be a way forward to sort of learn the trade as well before you sort of start cracking into doing some installations.
Mm-hmm. And if you're going to do lock sound, I think the programmer is a very integral part of that of their benefits.
Sure.
And that goes right. You can either go out into your decoder tester or right out onto the test track, and that's nice because you don't stand that chance of burning up the decoder by putting it right onto the layout first out.
Yeah, sure. So do you offer custom made? Because obviously there's some people out there that want different resistor values, I suppose, for the LEDs or the functions, I should say. Is that something that you offer, or you sort of got a sort of set standard that you work against?
Thanks for asking. That is an important part of the business. People have come in and said, "I want 470 ohm resistors on my boards," and I kind of take a deep breath and say, "Well, if you want 470s, there you've got them, no problem."
Yeah, sure.
About the least I usually go is 750 ohm resistors. Most of the manufacturers use 1K, and I keep a bunch to line up with Loc sound with 2.2K on them.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to mix any of that bunch or any other particular resistors that you wanted for a particular function, I have boards that come in with no resistors on them at all, and
Yeah.
I'll make a custom board for you.
Yeah, lovely, lovely, lovely. So how would someone go about doing that on your website? They'd go into the order tab, which we've got open there, pick the decoder, and it's just like
Yeah, my apologies for that table. That no matter how hard I've tried to make
no,
that
we won't
work.
show that. That's fine. Okay, so you can probably during the add to cart, and once you go through, there's a big comment section that you'd be able to specify what you're looking at, or email you. I'm assuming would be another great way.
I think email and just asking me, and then I'll PayPal invoice you.
Yeah.
The website is like a lot of things. It's a lot more rigid than I'd like to be.
Yeah.
But
sure.
It works. At least I'm somewhat honest and can use PayPal, and they haven't come and shut me down yet.
Yeah, they have their little idiosyncrasies, some of these point of sales, that's for sure. So, but it's the world we live in. So, we've touched on the different undertakings for 21 pins. Now, are you able to use? All right. So, some European stock is what I run, has 8 pins, so it's an older. I could see you could probably you can buy a harness, a 21 pin to 8 pin harness. Would that still work with your Decoder Buddy, or you haven't sort of experimented with anything like that?
To be honest with you, I haven't experimented with that at all yet. I'm sure if there's, I'm pretty sure I've heard of a 21 to an 8 pin cable that would work for sure. Yeah.
No, you can definitely get them, because I installed one in what was it? An electric diesel that I've got. For some reason I bought the wrong decoder, but I had the harness for it. So that'd be interesting. So
one thing I think I can say is that the NEM and the NMRA standard decoders work in the Decoder Buddy. Both of them work fine.
Yeah. Sure.
That was I wasn't sure of that at first.
Yeah, sure. Which is very interesting you bring that up, because I don't know what it is with the European stock, but they come up with some other different plugs as well, like Plux 26 or Plux 18, I can't remember and it's just they come up with all these different standards, and obviously 21 pin is where Loc Sound makes, and also Soundtrack's, my understanding, that's sort of their staple, but they do venture into these other conventions, I suppose, or plug types, which is very interesting, obviously, for the European market, but obviously we're talking more the US and Australian market here. So now,
yep.
What is there anything on the horizon for new products, I suppose, is the next thing? Is there anything that you're looking at, or you're concept testing, or you're developing?
Right now, just I'd like to say days, but I'm not going to do that. It's probably going to be weeks or months. But we're taking one of the minis and putting one of the Next 18s onto it, so that it will take a smaller footprint, but also be just a little bit less height, and go into just maybe a few more locomotives, and just have the broadness of being able to use another decoder.
Yeah, sure. Also see on your website here, you've got some, I'm assuming they look 3D printed items.
They are 3D printed.
Yeah. So can you tell us about those a little bit?
The Loco lights kind of sprung from the Decoder Buddy, in that I had lights and I had extra functions for lights, so I could use them.
Yeah.
And I was teaching flying. I'll digress for a minute. And the fellow that owns Vermont Railway, or part of it, he's a family of 3 siblings that run and own Vermont Railway. And he came to me and said, "Nick, I like the way you fly. You want to run a locomotive?" And yeah, he didn't have to ask twice. Yeah, and I didn't go home to get my toothbrush either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to run a locomotive a little bit and get up close and familiar, and started realizing that there were a few more lights on them and a few more things to do. And so the next step was ground lights and step lights. And when I was working with those, there were ground lights and step lights available, but not to the precision that we needed. And when the new printers came out, not the ones that had the plastic that fed into them, but the ones with the bath of plastic and the UV setter.
Yep. The STL file printers. Yep.
Yep. Were able to give us the sensitivity that we needed to print those very nicely.
Sure.
So they're very accurate representations of kind of a standard fixture. As you look at it, it's almost like a street light. It's ubiquitous in the industry for years and years and years. So I said, wow, that'd be a nice product to make. So I had it made. And they were a little bit more expensive than what I wanted to start out with. So I started to market them, and I said, I just didn't feel comfortable with the total price of everything. So I thought maybe instead of mounting them on a 0402 SMD LED, I'd see if I could get a hold of some 0201 SMD LEDs. And I learned how to solder them onto 40 gauge magnet wire and 38 gauge magnet wire. And that's a handful. I don't think there are very many people in the world that are that crazy.
No.
So, but what I found was they fit, the 0201s just fit very nicely into the ends of the fixtures.
Sure.
So that was what I needed. So I sell rafts of 12 fixtures. I sell them with LEDs, with 0402 LEDs, and then I'll sit at the bench and make custom make fixtures with the LEDs inside them. Right. That just really they fit onto a locomotive very nicely. Just use a little bit of cyanoacrylate, just like you would an LED, and just put it up in and off you go.
Yeah, I'm showing some photos of one particular locomotive here, obviously with the step light here on your website. That's just lovely. So, and I'm just looking at this other one there. It's just got Southern. Sorry, I'm not all that au fait with American locomotives, so my apologies here. But it's got Southern on the side of it, road number 5000. If you can see that on the screen there, just it's the whole undertaking of all the different lights. You got the step lights. You got the light that's
the high walkway lights.
Yeah, the walkway lights. Yeah, the sky's the limit. It's so interesting. I find coming across people like yourself. It's just a different form of rivet counting, isn't it? I think, you're obviously into the lighting side of things and just get all that Mickey Mouse, as we call it in Australia here, as a colloquialism. But it's just very exciting that, different people they got their different passions.
Yep. Yep. I've yet to really weather a locomotive. I just that's my next step. I want to learn how to weather. And yeah, but you can really love a locomotive.
Yeah, you can do a lot to them, that's for sure. So they're definitely the front and center of on the stage for our hobby, aren't they? So
they are.
So I know we've already spoken just briefly about installation side of things, and I said this is not a installation interview, so to speak, so we're not going to go through intimately how you would go about it, but can we just maybe touch just briefly how you might do an installation, sort of what you start with? So if we can sort of start with that, that would be great.
That's a good picture you got up. You got the ace up there. Actually, if you want to go back one picture, that
yep,
that's okay, no big deal.
So they're scrolling through.
Even those you can. That's good, Des. Those are the three generations of Atlas locomotives. That's the ace I was talking about. You can see the ground lights and the step lights on that. Yep. So, it all depends upon what strikes me. If I've been doing a lot of wiring lately, then I might want to just work on a frame. So put a Decoder Buddy in a frame and get that all wired up, and then I can set that aside and start working on the shell. And on the shell, the shells really take a lot of time. And when I talk to the installers, they say I can have a Decoder Buddy in 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
And the engine and the locomotive going back and forth on the track with the lighting board in it. The real time consuming part is putting the lights in. And
sure.
There are a number of different ways to do that. There are people that make the lenses. I make lenses out of microcrystal clear and Formula 560 canopy glue.
Sure.
Larry Linger, Solo Contracting, has a YouTube video on that. That's he and I are just about right on top of each other.
Yep, sure.
And so that's a good way to do the ditch lights and the headlights and any other lights that need to be covered or have lenses. I don't think the ground lights and the step lights or the high walkway lights necessarily do.
Yeah.
The one that I'm thinking about right now, and I haven't quite come to what I'm going to do in my mind yet, is the low walkway lights on a EMD and a GE locomotives are translucent.
Sure.
Have translucent lenses, not clear lenses like a headlamp or a ditch light.
Okay. Yep.
And I've just got to find that substance that's going to be translucent and maybe plastic so that I can pour it.
Yeah, sure.
And have the LED set in there.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's fantastic. So, Nick, you and I have had a discussion just briefly, or before we went live or went on to record this interview, that you've nicely offered a 10% off for 1 month. So that's 1 month from when this video goes up, and I'll put the dates in the description below. So what they need to do is mention the episode number and the interview on model railroad techniques, and you'll honour 10% off their total invoice, I suppose. So thank you very much for that and the listeners. So now, Nick, is there anything else you want to discuss about the Decoder Buddy? I've sort of got sort of the end of my questions here. So it's been a fantastic sort of little insight on this little cottage business.
Well, thanks. Actually, before we started, I did off when they come in in panels of 21, and I was at the sander, and it's just a fun business to be in. I like the customer service part. Sure. When people, I don't like people to have trouble, but people do have trouble or questions. I try to make myself as available as possible to help people.
Sure.
And that's the fun part for me.
Yeah, lovely.
So. And talking with you tonight has been a lot of fun too, Daz. I really appreciate.
Yeah, well, you reached out to me, and it's fantastic. So if anyone else does want to come on to have a chat with me for an Australian from the other side of the world, please email me just as Nick did to say, hey, I'd like to come on the show. So thank you for reaching out.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So as I said, Nick, thank you so much for taking the time away from the business. the family and the layout to chat with me at Model Railroad Techniques today. It's been very insightful, and I've learned a lot how I might move forward to do, because it's something I think I would like to get into with some of my Australian diesels that I've got. Because it's not really done a lot here in Australia to the nth degree with some of the lighting, so it's been a fantastic chat.
Thank you, and I appreciated my time with you tonight, and appreciate that you've taken time from your family and all.
Yeah,
thank
definitely.
you.
Thank you.
Make sure you subscribe, click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming videos. Support us on Patreon, like us on Facebook and Instagram at Model Railroad Technique.